At LinkedIn, we know hiring is a big deal for your small business. Sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming. LinkedIn uses data that you can't find anywhere else to give you the best candidates, all so you can feel confident you're hiring the best person for the job. And even a little hiring bliss. See why 86% of small businesses who post a job on LinkedIn get a qualified candidate within a day. Post a job for free at linkedin.com/achieve. LinkedIn, your next great hire is here.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
Hey, where you been? Buckeye Talk is about to begin. Hey, come on in.
Welcome back to Buckeye Talk. I'm Stefan Krajisnik. That's Andrew Gillis. Back to talk a little bit of recruiting today, Andrew. We've talked so much this week about the spring game and the spring transfer portal and everything that goes into the transition from spring football to the summer offseason. And a big part of the summer offseason is recruiting. Andrew covers all that for us. He's on top of it all. And the first place he goes with any recruiting news is the subtext line. So make sure to subscribe to that, 614-350-3315, 2-week free trial. Andrew, first place you went during our breaking news segment of the last pod was the Texters to talk about Brock Boyd, a 4-star wide receiver in the 2026 class. He is, looking at the 247 Sports Composite rankings, like I said, he's a 4-star, number 374 player in the class, 58 wide receiver, and a 52 player out of Texas. He's from Southland, Texas, goes to South Lake Carroll. 6'2", 183 is what he's listed at on his 247 site here. But anytime Brian Hartline lands a wide receiver, it's going to catch your attention, right? So what do you like about this guy, and what do you think he can bring to Ohio State throughout his collegiate career when he gets here?
Well, he's fast, and that to me is one of the things that stands out. He ran a 21.7 200-meter dash time as a freshman. He's a track and field kid. Competes in the triple jump as well. This is a kid that can move it a little bit, and I think that is the first thing when you watch, his huddle tape. That is the first thing that kind of stands out when you look at him. I think this is a unique kind of addition for Ohio State because the speedster element is pretty interesting to me, because when you look at where Ohio State has gone in previous classes, Brock is 6'2", but in 2025, you bring in Bodpin Miller, and he is a bigger body, right? Now you are betting on athleticism and betting on a change of position with Bodpin, and he was certainly not one of your higher rated recruits, and it's going to take a little bit. But even your number one rated recruit is Quincy Porter, and Quincy Porter is a bit of a, kind of bigger prospect there. To me, this is a, this is a nice ad for Ohio State because of that speed, like I mentioned. You're talking about a kid
is he more of a slot guy or an outside guy?
I think he's going to be more of an outside guy. That's a good question. He's going to be more
intriguing considering he's 6'3". Like Jeremiah Smith is listed as 6'3", so that's exciting to me.
Yeah, and that to me, I think is probably something that we're going to have to pay attention to because, you add Quincy Porter, who's 6'3", Bodpin Miller, who's 6'4", even Phillip Bell last year in the 2025 class is 6'2", Des Jones 6 feet. He's your slot guy. Brock Boyd feels like an outside target to me because when you look at this class, Chris Henry Jr. is 6'5", 6'6". I mean, he's playing on the outside. Like you're not putting a guy like that on the inside unless it's at tight end, and that's not going to happen. So then you have Boyd at 6'2". They have another 4-star prospect, Jaden Ricketts. He's out of Pataskala in Ohio. He is a 4-star player. He is 6 feet tall. He strikes me as this is our prototypical slot guy. This is a guy that we're going to put in that type of role. And I do think Ricketts is a more of a developmental type of player. Ricketts is somebody that, is going to be a little bit maybe more of a long-term development project. Whereas with Boyd, he attends South Lake Carroll. That's one of the better football programs in the state of Texas. His team went to the state championship game last year. This is a kid who, when you talk about learning curves, there really shouldn't be a big one for him, at least not as big of one as, some other guys are going to have making the college jump. So, yeah, I think this is a nice move. You're going to put him on the outside. He can run. He's a great route runner. This is a move that Ohio State had kind of been after for a little while, and they flip his commitment from TCU, and now he's a Buckeye.
So he is the 11th player to commit to Ohio State in the 2026 class. He flipped from TCU. He's a third wide receiver. You mentioned Jaden Ricketts, the 4-star, who's committed to the class, and then obviously Chris Henry Jr., the 5-star in the composite rankings. So what do you think about this receiver class for 2026? I think it's a pretty good group. I'm never really going to doubt a Brian Hartline recruiting class, but this seems to be a pretty promising group. You kind of got a mix of everything. You got Chris Henry, a 6'5" guy, Brock Boyd listed as 6'2", 6'3", who's, like you mentioned, the speed. You got Ricketts at 6 foot. Like, it seems like you got a little bit of everything in this class at receiver.
Yeah, I think you have to like where this room is headed, and I think they're probably going to go for 4, and I think the most likely option right now is Caden Dixon-Wyatt. He's a top 150 prospect at Mater Dei. He is a teammate of Chris Henry Jr. He's going to take an official visit, I believe, May 30th to Ohio State. So if that is your 4, if you're going to take these 3, Boyd, Ricketts, and Henry, who, by the way, Chris Henry Jr. has shut down his commitment. He is locked in. He is all scored away, and he is going to come to Ohio State. You feel pretty good about where Ricketts and Boyd stand, and then you start to talk about, okay, well, what's your 4th? And if that is Caden Dixon-Wyatt, this thing could be wrapped up pretty soon, and you're feeling really good about that group, especially when you have a 5-star like Chris Henry Jr. in that group. Ohio State taking 4 every year is starting, I think, to be the norm because rosters are going to expand to 105. Receiver is a position that can play special teams. If you need receivers to kind of double dip in that regard, you can play them there, especially for some of the younger guys. But then you look at where this room is headed. Brandon Inniss and Carnell Tate, as crazy as this sounds, could theoretically declare for the NFL draft after the 2025 season. So, we talk about these guys and we say, oh, look at what Brandon Inniss can do in his first year contributing. And can Carnell Tate take that leap now that Emeka Egbuka's gone? It's like, okay, well, these guys might be gone. Jeremiah Smith's going into his second year. He has 2 years left playing at Ohio State. He's not going to come back for a 4th year. It's just not going to happen. Bryson Rodgers is going into his 3rd year. What's going to happen there is he going to stick around? Is he going to be a part of this program for a handful of years? Quincy Porter's pushing. Mylan Graham's in his 2nd year. The conversation we're having about Brandon Inniss right now, essentially, I think is where we're going to be with Mylan Graham next year, where we're like, oh my goodness, look at how great, Mylan Graham, was as a 4th or 5th receiver on this team. Oh, and by the way, he could also go pro. He could also leave for the NFL after this year. So this room's going to turn over really quickly a lot. And this is just the way that this is going to work under Brian Hartline because this is just how it works under Brian Hartline. When you are a factory of sending first-round picks and first-round type of players to the NFL, okay, well, you probably need to supplement them with 4 every year. Because if you're going to have guys leave, you need to supplement them in and bring these guys in. So, yeah, you have Phillip Bell, Mylan Graham, Des Jones, Bodpin Miller, Quincy Porter, Demarion Witten still in that room. You have a lot of young guys in that room, but you cannot expect every single one of those guys to, 1, be first-round picks, and 2, be guys that are going to stick around. So I really like this class for Ohio State. If the 3 right now and then adding in a 4th, specifically if it's Caden Dixon-Wyatt, I mean, man, I think you have to feel really, really good about, about where this class is headed, about where this group is headed with 2026 on the horizon.
Yeah, the wide receiver position is so interesting to me because this year you return 2 starters, and the guy that steps in is Brandon Inniss, who's been around the program and has had a big role at times for this team. Next year is going to be interesting because you assume you get Jeremiah Smith back, but like you said, there's potential to lose Carnell Tate and Brandon Inniss, and then now we're looking at guys like, not only does Mylan Graham have to step up, he's probably got to be a starter. Not only does Quincy Porter have to step up, he might have to be a starter. So the future of this room is intriguing because it does feel like we're maybe a year away from some of these young guys really having to step into a bigger role, as opposed to Brandon Inniss, who's kind of been eased into his role, Carnell Tate, who's kind of been eased into his role as starters on his team. So the position's intriguing, and Ohio State's had so much success at it that you kind of count on, as long as Brian Hartline's here, receiver's going to be fine, but you are going to have some guys who step up, which means there's going to be an opportunity for some of these younger guys like Chris Henry Jr. to maybe come and compete for a job in year 1. So,
well,
go ahead.
Well, I just want to say real quick, I think it is unfair that we continually use Jeremiah Smith as a bar. Jeremiah Smith was one of the best receivers in college football in his freshman year. He's the best offensive player in the sport right now, I think. We can't keep looking at Jeremiah Smith going, hey, look, freshmen can play. But freshmen can play. They can't play like that, but they can play. Like Chris Henry Jr. coming in and having a role in year 1 is not crazy. It's for the same thing that we're talking about with Quincy Porter. Quincy Porter coming in here and having a role in year 1 is not crazy. And it is not outlandish that he finds a way to contribute, whether that's, minimally or whether that's in a significant kind of way. We'll see. But I mean, Chris Henry Jr., like you said, he is the exact type of player that you think could have a role. And then all of a sudden you start to map it out and go, okay, well, if you could just get a year of development for Ricketts and Boyd, and maybe you bring in Caden Dixon-Wyatt again, or maybe you bring in another 2026 receiver. I mean, that's kind of the way that this should work. And for as talented as these kids are, you're mapping out a long-term path to success there.
Yeah, Jeremiah Smith is only the second best recruit in Ohio State history. So, and the first is Quinn Ewers. So, yeah, Jeremiah Smith is the exception. I think we've come to the conclusion on that. Let's skip ahead and talk about another guy who's committed. He's in the 2027 class. Brady Edmunds, quarterback, number 1 quarterback in his class, number 3 player out of California, number 9 player in the country. Again, that was the 2027 class. He's 6'5", 215, Huntington Beach, California. Quarterbacks out of California. They work out at Ohio State. At least CJ Stroud did, and I think Julian Saint's going to as well. So I would suggest that would suggest that Brady Edmunds will have his own success. You actually got to see him, talk to him not long ago. I think the day after the spring game is when you saw him, correct? So what'd you learn? What'd you think? And what'd you see?
Yeah, it was cool. Brady Edmunds, he was on campus for a couple of days for the spring game. Came out here on Thursday, I believe. Saw practice on Friday. Got to kind of be around everything, and then Saturday was here for the spring game. Then he drove up to Massillon. There was a regional Elite 11. Unfortunately, it was in Massillon. Last year it was in Upper Arlington, so it was 15 minutes away. So I was able to go see Tavian Sinclair 15 minutes away. And this time around I had to drive, 2 hours up one way to go see him. But it was cool. Brady Edmunds, he, it was my first time kind of getting to see him in person. I mean, that's just by nature of him living in Huntington Beach, California. But yeah, I mean, one of the other reporters that was there had a line that, I can't blatantly steal. It was Mick Walker who said he could throw it through a wall. And that to me was probably the most apt way to say what I saw from Brady Edmunds. He's the number 9 overall player in the composite rankings, the number 1 quarterback. If you remember, he actually committed to Ohio State. He was in that wave of kids that either reaffirmed their commitment or outright committed after they lost to Michigan. He was on hand for the OSU-Michigan game. And December 2nd, he decided he was going to commit. So you kind of had the hunch that he was already going to commit when he came for that OSU-Michigan game. And I think that is probably the perfect example, probably the example that I will get to use for all time when people say, ooh, what if you lose a game where a kid's visiting? Kid's not going to make a decision based off of one game. And yeah, I mean, Edmunds, he's a big kid. He could throw it a mile. That to me, I think is his best attribute. When you look at him throw, just drop back fire. Like that to me was really, really good. 247 compares him. They give like a little player comparison every once in a while. And they compared him to Justin Herbert. And I don't hate it. I don't hate that comparison, because when you're talking about a big kid like that who could just throw it a million miles an hour and really kind of put it anywhere on the field, I see it. I see the vision when they're talking about that. And, this is definitely maybe a kid that is more of a pocket passing type of quarterback than, we might be used to. Like, I think you hear about, Will Howard and you say, oh, 6'5", he was 240. Well, Brady Edmunds is 6'5", and he's a junior in high school. Brady Edmunds can become Will Howard, and he can, become this big type of, body frame that can run the ball, and he can be this bowling ball with legs, and you can map out this future for Brady Edmunds. And then you start to see him, and you're like, you know what? This kid is just maybe more of a set pocket passer than you might think. So, yeah, I was very impressed watching him throw. There are kids that when they throw the ball, it leaves their hands a little bit differently. I had that same vibe with Tavian St. Clair a year ago when we saw him play, because you see Tavian and you're like, wow, he's throwing the ball. It just looks different. It just looks unique. And Brady's still got some time to grow into his body because he's a member of the class of 2027. He is still a high school sophomore. He is going to enroll in his junior season like in a couple of months. That to me is crazy. And that to me is probably the craziest part about recruiting sometimes, is that when we talk about Brady Edmunds, we're like, he'll be on campus in February of 2027, January of 2027. And here I am at a high school recruiting camp in April of 2025, watching this kid throw. But man, you see what the vision is, and you see why Ohio State likes him.
So while you were talking, I was watching a little bit of his huddle tape. I see the Herbert. I think there's a little more athleticism than Herbert. Like Herbert isn't he's not a bad, like he's not just like has to be in the pocket passer. Like he can get out, but there's a clip of a 61-yard run that Edmunds has for a touchdown. I don't know if I've seen Herbert doing a whole lot of that. So this kid, watching his tape, I highly suggest to any listeners to go ahead and do it if you want to get excited. The way the ball, the accuracy is crazy. The first play on this film is, it's a bad snap. He picks it up off the ground. As soon as he looks up, there's a defensive lineman probably about a foot away from him, and he drops a dime 15 yards down the field for a touchdown. Like it's crazy. This kid looks college ready when you watch some of this film. So landing him and so is your impression that this is a long time to be committed, right? And usually quarterbacks, I won't say usually, but a lot of the times when someone is committed ahead of time, it's quarterback, right? Because you kind of see them oftentimes show leadership qualities even in the recruiting process of being committed. I think Tavian St. Clair kind of fits that boat, right? But it's a long way away from signing day for the 2027 class and for Brady Edmunds. And he's in California, and I'm sure there is a million schools going after him. I love going through the offer sheets of some of these guys, like number one player or number one quarterback in the country. he's got offers from Georgia and Ohio State and Michigan, but then there's like UConn and UTEP also, offered him. And I'm like, you know what? Good for you. Good for you, UTEP, going after the number one quarterback in the country. So what is kind of your sense of the pulse of where he stands and kind of how locked in he is and how confident Ohio State fans should feel about a California player in the 2027 class being committed?
Yeah, you should feel really, really good. You should feel pretty much as good as you felt with Tavian. I understand if there is a little bit of hesitancy, not only because it is so long away, but because Brady is from Huntington Beach, California. That is a long way from home. You understand it. But the sense that I get and the sense that I've gotten is pretty much like we talk about with receivers. If Ryan Day is at Ohio State and nothing really changes at Ohio State, like nothing fundamental changes at Ohio State, Brady Edmunds is going to be at Ohio State. I don't view this as a recruitment that it's, oh man, if Billy Fessler's not here, look out. I mean, look, Brady Edmunds had effusive praise for Billy Fessler when I talked to him. There was a group of us there in a media scrum kind of had that conversation, and Brady was really open about it, and he was talking about how great he is and how how much he's learned and all these other kind of different things about Fessler. But this is a more of a long-term commitment. His family, Ohio State fans, he's got family roots in Ohio. He grew up a Buckeye fan. I wrote a story for the website. I timed it for today, so for those listening to the podcast that are curious and want to go read more about Brady Edmunds, I published it today, and I asked him about visiting Columbus, and there was a quote that stuck out. It was the end of my story where he said, quote, "Obviously Buckeye fans are a little crazy, so they know who you are. So just walking through the stadium and stuff like that, people screaming your name, it's a little surreal too, just growing up as a fan as well. I'm still one of them, kind of, just a huge Buckeye." Like, this is a kid that you feel pretty good about. And I understand it's a few years out, but quarterbacks commit a few years out. Quarterbacks do pledge a few years away. This is not unheard of that when you talk about, where kids are at, in the rankings, that they do have commitments. Like Jameer Brown is obviously committed elsewhere. That's obviously a bit of a unique case. He's a 5-star receiver from Ohio, but Ohio State didn't have a 2026 quarterback commit, and they still don't. So jumping on a 2027 kid early is probably the smart move and the prudent move, and that's where Ohio State is at. So, yeah, Brady Edmunds, you don't want to say locked in today's day and age because anything could happen, but, I mean, I feel pretty good that Brady Edmunds is going to be on campus in a few years.
Do you know the backstory of why he's an Ohio State fan?
Yeah, his family is from Ohio.
Okay.
He's got, I believe his grandfather's from Ohio. I believe it's Cuyahoga Falls, if I'm not mistaken. I would have to check that. But yeah, they're from Northeast Ohio. Like, this is a kid who, when you talk about, why it's family roots. It's not, I grew up watching this player. And by the way, this kid's a 2027 player. I think he's 16 years old. So we're talking about somebody who, like, their first memory of college football might be Ohio State winning the national championship in 2015. Their first memory of college football might be, oh, I remember JT Barrett. So it is kind of crazy to think about. I do think about that from time to time as I talk to these kids. But yeah, I mean, it is a deep kind of family root that kind of has him, and has his family, really Buckeyes.
Yeah, I'm looking at this tweet he sent out on December 3rd, and it's a bunch of photos of him as a kid on Ohio State's campus and wearing a bunch of Ohio State gear. So yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So 2027 quarterback, Brady Edmunds, committed. Andrew saw him, just as impressed in person as he was through the rankings and stuff like that. Let's talk about a couple guys who aren't committed, and then we'll take a break and then talk about another guy who is committed. But let's start off with Jackson Cantwell. Number 1 player in the 2026 class, offensive tackle out of Missouri. I think most of the rankings have him as the top player in the class, but definitely on the composite. What's the latest on his recruitment? I think he just set a date for when he's announcing his commitment. It sounds like it's down to 3 schools, and Ohio State isn't one of them. But some of these graphics coming out suggest that Ohio State's kind of that 4th school and maybe is still staying in the mix. I know that you're not overly optimistic, so tell me your thoughts on his recruitment and where Ohio State stands.
Yeah, so for a long time, Jackson Cantwell was looking to schedule an official visit to Ohio State, and that was real slow going. It was not set. He had an official visit to Miami, to Missouri, to Georgia, to Michigan, to Oregon. Those were his top 5, and Ohio State was the school that rounded it out and made it his top 6. The Buckeyes were involved. The Buckeyes were in that group. They were right there with everybody else. He was just trying to find a official visit time. That has not happened. Then he said, he gave one of those like cryptic tweets a couple of days ago, and he said, my decision might be coming sooner than you might think, or something along those lines. Like might be closer to the end than I thought. I believe that was the exact phrasing. And then, like 4 days later, he said that for a reason, almost home, and he eliminated Missouri and Michigan. So if there's any consolation, it's that Michigan's out for Ohio State fans. But he set a date for April 30th. I'm not optimistic about Ohio State's chances here. I don't think that the Buckeyes are going to land him. I think it's going to be Miami, Georgia, or Oregon that does land Cantwell. I mean, look, this kid is really good. He is a pro-ready tackle. He's 6'7.5", 300 pounds. I mean, if you need to know anything else, there was a moment during his junior season where he ran out of the tunnel carrying a Waffle House flag. So this kid is ready to play football at a high level. He is a shot putter. He was the Missouri boys track and field player of the year in the shot put, obviously. So like this kid is just a remarkable football player. His dad is a former Olympic thrower. His mom is a former Olympic thrower. Like, this is just a massive human being that comes from a family of big time people, of big people. And you had everything laid out in terms of what this player could be. I just don't think it's going to be Ohio State. The Oregon official visit did get rescheduled, which to me, one of the first things Stephen told me when I got this job, and one of the first things I had known about this job when I took it and when I came on, and one of the first things everybody else will tell you about this job, Stefan, I'm sure it was the same at Mississippi State and at Indiana and at every other place you've been. There's this phrase, follow the visits. And maybe it's not Oregon, but he's taken an OV to another school 3 and 4 days before he's about to commit. I mean, that to me has just kind of laid it out to say this is not probably going to go well for Ohio State. Now, just because this is not going well for Ohio State doesn't mean I dislike where Ohio State's class is at. I really like the 2026 group that Ohio State has put together right now. Sam Greer, Maxwell Riley. Riley's top 150, top 125 actually. Greer's a top 200 kid. Tucker Smith is a 3-star interior player, I think, is where they view him, either guard or center. Ohio State has told him, be ready to play both. So he's at guard or center. And this is a kid that is in Arizona who committed a couple of weeks ago. So you've got a base. And if you remember, longtime listeners of Buckeye Talk will remember when Steven and I talked about David Sanders last year in August when he was getting ready to make that decision. We talked about it and went, well, if you don't land David Sanders, you're in a heap of trouble. And this is another kind of 5-star ready tackle that could come in year 1 and be ready to play. And certainly in year 2 is going to be ready to start. And that's just not where Ohio State is, where if you miss on Cantwell, okay, that's fine. You've got other prospects in the cooker right now. Felix Ojo is the number 7 overall player in the class, number 3 offensive tackle in the class. Ohio State has an official visit for him on May 30th. He's going to take a visit to Michigan. Right now, it sounds like that's Ohio State and Texas. He is from Mansfield, Texas. So, again, this is another 5-star tackle that Ohio State is involved in. They've got other options. This is not Jackson Cantwell or bust like it may have been in years past, like with the David Sanders. So, I don't think Ohio State's going to get good news in 2 Wednesdays from now on April 30th. But that's not necessarily the be-all, end-all. I think, this is just a commitment that Ohio State tried its best in. I think they put a decent foot forward. I think other schools were just kind of ready to maybe promise a little bit more to Cantwell, and for Ohio State, that's totally okay.
So I saw Felix Ojo when he was at the practice before the spring game as a big dude, and I won't get into the semantics like who should be the best tackle in the class, like whatever, the rankings are the rankings. But I will say, if Ohio State doesn't land Cantwell, but they settle for the number 1 offensive tackle or the number 1 player out of Texas, I think you're okay. I think anytime you can get the best high school player out of Texas, you're probably feeling pretty good, especially if he's a 6'6" offensive tackle. So, yeah, that's an interesting recruitment. I think it really sounds like Ohio State's got a chance there. Obviously, the in-state pool with Texas is going to be intriguing, and obviously the rivalry with Michigan always makes a recruitment intriguing when they go after the same guy. But he's an interesting prospect that I like a lot from what I've seen. One more guy that we want to talk about who's not committed before we take our break, Bralan Womack, safety out of Mississippi, Flowood, Mississippi, coming in around 5'11", 6 foot. So he's the number 1 safety in the class according to the composite rankings. Ohio State has the number 2 safety already, Blaine Bradford, the kid from Baton Rouge, who committed to Ohio State at the end of March. The safety, the defensive back kind of class for 2026 is intriguing because it's kind of loaded, and it seems like you got some versatility with some players. Like I know Weatherspoon, he kind of has been listed as a corner some places, a safety some places. Simeon Caldwell is listed as a safety, but 247 in the composite rankings. Also list him as a linebacker. So, like, you got a lot going on there. But it seems like Blaine Bradford is a safety, and he's the number 2 safety in the class. And now you're going after Bralan Womack, number 1 safety in the class. First of all, if McArary can pull the number 1 safety in the class out of Mississippi and the number 2 safety in the class out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, there's going to be some SEC chants going on in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center.
Yeah, I think I made this joke on a previous pod. I was like, if that happens, Ohio State fans should enjoy it because McArary probably won't be around for very long. I think, look, he is the safeties coach at Ohio State, and look, maybe it works out, and Patricia gets an NFL job after the year, and Guerrero is able to get promoted or whatever. But Ryan Day called him a star in the making at the team's championship parade. Or not parade, but celebration or whatever. That kind of resonated with me, and I think he means more than just, oh, hey, look, this guy can coach up ball. I think he means this guy can recruit. Bralan Womack has 4 schools, Florida A&M, Auburn, and Ohio State. Ohio State does get that coveted last visit. He's going to visit Florida A&M, Auburn on May 30th, June 6th, and June 13th. Ohio State gets that last visit on June 20th. That's a really big deal. That is a massive, massive deal to get Bralan Womack in the folds in that group of Ohio State visitors where, I mean, you look at the visitors that weekend, Chris Henry Jr. is going to be on campus. Simeon Caldwell is going to be on campus that weekend. I'm trying to think who else they have on there. Derek Cooper, 4-star running back, is going to be on campus that weekend. They've got a lot of really, really talented players that are set to visit, and you start to map it out and go, you know what? Okay, this is real for Ohio State. And that was the sense I've gotten throughout his entire recruitment. Bralan Womack, he visited last June, made a trip to Notre Dame, and got an offer there, and one day later was in Columbus at a camp. Notre Dame was holding camp the next, very similar to what Ohio State does. Then the next day, Ohio State had that same camp. They offered Womack. His whole family was here, or I should say his dad and his uncle. They kind of made a trip. made a trip through the North. They were able to see a lot of different schools, a lot of different colleges. I know Notre Dame was very high on his list, and Notre Dame kind of fell off a little bit. And Ohio State kind of jumped right out there as well with Notre Dame, and now Ohio State is in the mix still. I mean, this northern interest is very real from Bralan Womack. I think some people still, and rightfully so perhaps, get skeptical whenever they hear a kid, Flowood, Mississippi, 5-star safety, and we got to beat Auburn, A&M, and Florida. I mean, that kid might just want to stay down south. And I don't think people necessarily view it as a negative. I think some people kind of look at it and go, what are you going to do? You already got, Bradford, and you already got Caldwell, who's going to start as a safety, and we'll see. Okay, that's fine. But the Womack stuff is real, and fans should be excited about what Bralan Womack potentially could bring to Ohio State, because this is an athletic freak. He looks totally different than the last time I saw him. Last summer, he, you could see the athleticism, you could see the ranginess, but he was a little skinnier, a little smaller, and he was on campus for Ohio State Student Appreciation Day practice. And I walked up to him and his dad, and I went, "Oh my goodness, like this guy's huge." So yeah, for me, Bralan Womack is a kid that Ohio State fans should be excited about. Now, temper those expectations. He's not going to commit until August 23rd. That is week 0. That is the Saturday of week 0 for college football. Ohio State doesn't play that day. It's a week before they play Texas, so you do have some time. You do have a little bit of runway, a little bit of leeway before this commitment happens. There is a lot that is going to happen. We have, a month or so, month and a half until official visits start. Then you have official visit season, and his visit is on June 20th. And then he'll get back to Mississippi, and he'll have 2 months to make a decision. So he's going to make his decision before, things really start to kick off in his senior year. But Bralan Womack is a kid that Ohio State fans should be very, very attentive to. And I will keep you updated, obviously, 614-350-3315. Whereas if you don't feel great about Cantwell, and I'm probably saying that's probably the right way to be, expect nothing. And if you get anything, be hopefully, optimistically surprised. Bralan Womack is somebody that is a very real option to come to Ohio State. Every time he's come to Ohio State, Guerreri and Walton and everybody on that coaching staff has rolled out the red carpet for him. Bralan Womack is somebody that they very much want in this class.
What were some of the visits you said he had coming up or visited when he was here up north?
He visited Notre Dame last June. I remember that was that was the first one. And then 24 hours later, he visited Ohio State. I believe he visited Penn State and Michigan too. I believe they were also on that swing.
Interesting. Yeah, Mississippi is a low-key state when it comes to talent.
Yeah, this is right up your alleyway. You should.
Yeah, you look up in the NFL a lot of times, and you're like, wow, like outside of Texas and California and Florida, states that have massive populations too, like Mississippi relative to their population always has a decent amount of talent in the NFL. So I'm confused why Ole Miss at least isn't very involved in this recruitment. I understand Mississippi State's kind of going through a new coach and things of that nature, but Ole Miss to not be one of the options here is intriguing to me. So yeah, he's an intriguing player. And if Matt Guerreri can land this guy, that'll be quite something. Let's take our first break here. We're going to come back and talk about one more guy that Andrew will has seen and talked to, and he's a guy who's committed in the 2027 class. So we're going to take our break and come back here on Buckeye Talk.
Sergeant and Mr. Smith, you're going to love this house.
Bunk beds in a closet?
There's no field manual for finding the right home. But when you do, USAA Homeowners Insurance can help protect it the right way. Restrictions apply.
Marvel Studios' Thunderbolts will take the world by storm.
Yes! There's some big threat out there, and you're going to help me stop it.
Us?
Why, you got someplace to be?
On May 2nd.
Avengers are gone. No one's coming to save the day.
Their time.
I think we could be the people that are coming.
Has come.
Being the hero, there is no higher calling.
Let's do this.
Marvel Studios Thunderbolts. Only in theaters May 2nd. Get tickets now. Rated PG-13. Some material may be inappropriate for children under 13.
Welcome back into Buckeye Talk. Andrew Gillis, Stefan Krajisnik coming to you, talking about a little bit of recruiting. Andrew, believe it or not, Ohio State in the 2027 class has a 5-star receiver committed. They are going to have another good receiver coming in, the latest being Jameer Brown, as I mentioned, the 2027 class. He's the number 1 player in Ohio, number 1 receiver in the country, number 3 player overall in the country. And earlier this week, you actually got the chance to meet with him a bit, talk to him, interview him. First place you went with all that was the text line, 614-350-3315. Cannot recommend it enough, especially that 2-week free trial right now with all this recruiting going on. It's well worth your time and your subscription. I'll let you take it over, Andrew. What did you guys talk about? What were your impressions of him? And is this the next guy in what's going to be a lineage of like 17 straight years of Ohio State having a wide receiver go in the first round?
I mean, he very well could be. Jameer Brown, he is the number 3 overall player and the number 1 receiver in the 2027 class. Just a great kid, man. Like, there's certain kids you meet and it's, there's rarities that you meet a 16, 17-year-old kid and you go, oh, wow, that kid just really didn't want to talk to me, or that kid just really whatever. And Jameer went above and beyond. I mean, he was great. His coach, Roosevelt Mukes, was great. I was glad that they were able to host me, and we sat down and we talked about everything, man. And we talked for a while about kind of a lot of different things, and one of the things you mentioned was, is this the next guy? Well, he's got that ability. He's 6 feet, he's 185 pounds, and the kid is an absolute burner. He said he just set a PR in the 100 meters, 10.47. That's fast. I don't know if many people know that. That is fast. He is in the second semester of his high school sophomore year. That's crazy. So, this is a really, really talented football player with track speed, and something that got emphasized to me a lot by his coach was, sometimes you have football players that play track, and sometimes you have track athletes that play football. And this is a kid that is a football player who just so happens to play track. He's got elite speed. He's a great runner. And that, I think, is something that has really kind of stood out about his game. He committed to Ohio State back in November. He got the offer over the summer. This is a kid that had been on Ohio State's radar for a little bit. Certainly with Wayne, his coach told me that, they had a 7-on-7 going into his freshman year, and he just tracked this ball out of nowhere. They were like, he was in the slot, coming down the hash, looked up. They were like, oh, incomplete. Quarterback's throwing it away. And Jameer was able to track it down. And he goes, I looked at my receivers coach, and my receivers coach looked at me, and we both went, yep, that's good. That'll do. So this is a receiver that had been on the radar for a while. And I think when you talk what Ohio State receivers are, what Ohio State receivers can be, he's one of them. This is what they look like at Ohio State.
So Ohio State's got success kind of recruiting. I mean, obviously throughout the state of Ohio, and Dayton area is no exception. He went to high school with Josh Padilla, right? Or goes to the same high school Josh Padilla went to?
Yeah, they have had Wayne has had a lot of people come to Ohio State. Pretty much, I think, I was getting told today, pretty much since like 2000, there has been like a Wayne football player at Ohio State. There have been maybe a few lulls here, but Josh Padilla is one of them. Braxton Miller went to Wayne. There were a handful of other players. Mike Mickens and Marcus Freeman from Notre Dame, their DB's coach and their head coach, obviously went to Wayne. This is a really, really good football school, and they've had a lot of really talented players go out to not just Ohio State, but specifically with Ohio State, they have had a lot of success.
Yeah, I think those storylines are always cool too. Like pipelines, maybe not the word, maybe it is, I don't know, but like the connection a high school can have with, especially with a local school. Sometimes you see it randomly on a national scale where, like some schools just randomly have pull with other high schools out of state. But to especially see that in Ohio, I think that's cool. And I think it kind of, as tacky as it may sound, like the whole, like, what's it mean to be a Buckeye thing kind of adds to it a bit, where I think you see it with the Pickerington players all the time, right? Like, then that's as, about as local as you can get. But you're getting players who kind of understand the pressure and everything that comes with playing at Ohio State. So anytime you can get a player from a high school like that, that he's going to have somewhat of an understanding of what he's kind of stepping into, especially in that receivers room. I mean, you have to imagine he knows pretty damn well what Ohio State's been doing and what Brian Hartline's been able to do. And that's going to be something that, sticks out to him. So, yeah, when you look at all the measurables, when you talk about the speed, and then you look at, the ratings and all that, he's probably going to have to put on, he's listed at 170, so you don't want him to put on too much, but he's going to have to put on something when he gets to Ohio State.
Well, he told me today he was 185.
Okay. Oh, wow.
I mean, and importantly, he's already
that's crazy.
Yeah, he's already a sophomore in high school, and he's flying like that. So, really, I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, you want to get stronger. You want to make it maybe a better 185. You want to add a little bit more weight. But this is not a player that is running out of time. I'll put it like that, right? Like, this is a kid who I think when you talk to when you talk to kind of where his recruitment is, like he commented, he was like, there were a lot of people that were talking to me, you committed so early, and you were so early in this process. Like Ted Ginn coming out of high school per 247 was listed at 6 feet 170, and we all know how much he could fly. So yeah, to me, like, this is this is something that you could only expect him to get better and better as his high school career goes on.
So let me ask you this, and we just said this, like, Jeremiah Smith is the exception. He is not the standard in terms of what guys do as a freshman in college. But I think Quincy Porter's kind of on a path of a more like standard route, where I think he's gonna be good enough. This is the standard route for a 5-star player of this caliber, right? Like, he's good enough to get a decent amount of playing time, maybe have some impactful plays, but he's not, going to be quite Jeremiah Smith. Do you think Jameer is more of a year 2 type guy, or is he the type of guy that can come in year 1 and have a Quincy Porter-like role?
Oh, man. That's a tough question to answer, because
it is tough because he is still relatively so young, but
well, it's not just that. And that is, I think, the question with Ohio State's receiver room. He's going to show up in 2027. Jeremiah Smith's going to be gone. That's unfathomable that we're talking about, like, hey, blah, blah, blah. Like, we're talking about all these receivers, and Jeremiah Smith's not going to be here. Well, we're already a year into this.
Jeremiah Smith is here. He's got a impressive NIL deal in 2027.
Oh, good goodness, yeah. But Ennis and Tate are gonna be gone. Jeremiah Smith is gonna be gone, and it's gonna be, is Mylan Graham here? Because 24, 25, 26, that's Mylan Graham's 4th year. Does Mylan Graham have a 4th year? Does is Bryson Rogers still here? Like, Quincy Porter, he's going into his 3rd year at that point. Bodpin Miller, Des Jones, these are guys that would be going into their 3rd year. Chris Henry Jr. going into his 2nd year. We talked about Brock Boyd a little bit. He's going into his 2nd year at that point. Maybe you have somebody like Caden Dixon-Wyatt, who has yet to commit to Ohio State, but obviously is high on their watch list and high on their radar. Like, it's not so much a question, I think, with Jameer Brown of, is he going to be able to contribute? It's like, what else is there? What else is in that room? That to me is one of the interesting parts about this. Now, I think he's got something to give, maybe, that not everybody else in that room can, because we could talk about Chris Henry Jr. being awesome. Chris Henry Jr. is not going to be as fast as Jameer Brown, because when you're 6'6", speed just doesn't really translate like that. And Chris Henry Jr. is going to be able to give you something now in another way that Jameer Brown won't. So it's, okay, how does that speed manifest itself? How do you harness that speed on the field and say, you know what, we're going to use this in a manner that really helps out Ohio State? So he might have something that not everybody in that room has or has had. And that is what I think makes this Jameer Brown conversation pretty interesting as we get into it, because, you know, you talk about the speed element of this. I mean, you have to talk about it putting him on the field too.
It's crazy. Like those names that you just started listing off, like Ohio State's going to lose Jeremiah Smith, Cardinal Tate, and Brandon Ennis over the course of the year or two and be totally fine. And like, I'm sure 4 years ago, if you said Ohio State's 2024 trio receivers would be the best under the Ryan Day era, you're probably be saying, no way, dude. Like, no way it gets better. And then even after Marv, you're probably saying, no way they get a better trio. So like, it maybe sounds crazy to say that in 2027 they could have a better trio than Jeremiah, Cardinal, and Brandon Ennis. But at this point, like, who are we to count out Brian Hartline in that receivers room? Especially, it's like, I don't want to say the recruiting will get even better just because it is so good. Like, I don't even know what even better looks like landing the 1, 2, 3, and 4 receivers in a class. But like, if he's the OC and this offense is just flying through these receivers, like, it could get better. It's just crazy to think about, you know?
It's unfathomable. And that was one of the other things that we talked about that I wanted to get into. It's like, you know, Jameer is, like I said, he was just such a great kid, and you could tell he was really genuine about, you know, getting to know you and wanting to get to know me and wanting other people to get to know him and wanting other people to get to know his story. And, you know, it was really genuine. And one of the things that we talked about was like, as crazy as it is for us to be sitting here talking about Ohio State, you still have a little bit of time left in your high school career, right? You know, he was telling me there was this you know, report that he had a bunch of visits out there, and, you know, hey, Jameer Brown is taking visits to blah 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 blah, and it was all these different schools. And he was kind of adamant with me. He was like, that's not true. I was with my 7-on-7 team. So there are people that have said I've made all these visits and they're either not true. And I was at the school, and, you know, that's something that, you know, it was just, I was here. I wasn't really going around on all these other visits. And if I was, it was because I was with my 7-on-7 team and we just happened to be at X place today. So, you know, there's a bunch of other, you know, kind of things that kind of delve into a recruitment this long. You know, I texted out some of the news with Brady Edmunds after I talked to him, and one of our texters kind of questioned it, and they were like, yeah, I've heard this before, man. I'm sorry. He's a 2027 kid. I've heard all this before. I need to wait. And that's not crazy. But I think you're feeling pretty good about Jameer Brown. Now, he is going to visit Notre Dame tomorrow. And by tomorrow, I mean Thursday. So he will be on campus at Notre Dame on Thursday. That to me is due in part to the relationship that he has with Marcus Freeman, the relationship that he has with Mike Mickens. Both of those guys went to Wayne High School in Dayton. They went to the same place. Like they know the area, they know what it's like. He has a great relationship with those guys. You know, that to me is not really something that Ohio State fans should worry about. Certainly, I mean, like, take note of it, I guess. But, you know, a kid is going to take some visits, even if he commits early. It just kind of sounds like he's not maybe taking as many visits as people have thought. He's pretty locked into Ohio State. He loves Brian Hartline. He loves, you know, Ryan Day and kind of what they've got going for him. And, you know, he loves the plan that they've had and the way that they've recruited him and the way that they've kind of had him in the fold. So whenever he gets a chance to speak with them, he's really enjoyed it. And this is one of those kids where, you know, you start to map it out and you see he still has half his high school career left. And then Brian Hartline gets a chance to coach him. It's pretty special.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if there's probably any way to summarize a recruiting pod and maybe the state of recruiting at Ohio State in general, it's that the 2027 class has 2 commits right now. It's Brady Edmunds, the number 1 quarterback in the class, and it's Jameer Brown, the number 1 wide receiver in the class. So as long as Ryan Day and Brian Hartline are coaching at Ohio State. I think that's kind of become the norm, and I think that's kind of crazy to think about. But you could be watching a lot of footballs being thrown from Brady Edmunds to Jameer Brown over the next, X amount of years that they end up being together at Ohio State, which the way their recruiting profile suggests they're going to get about 3 years at Ohio State, and then we're both going to be on to the next level. But you never know. But it is fascinating seeing the recruiting at those two positions specifically, and it's exemplified in the 2027 class. All right, that was your week of podcasts of this duo. It feels like when the kids get left home alone, it's like, don't burn the house down. But we've done it. We've made it through the week, Andrew.
The inmates have had the keys to the asylum. That is exactly what this was.
I will say, I made a mistake. I might have lied early in the week when I said Stephen will be back for Friday's pod. We're actually not having a Friday pod. I forgot about the holidays coming up and Good Friday and all that going on this weekend. So next week we'll be back with Stephen, regular pod on Monday, the Leave No Doubt pod, and kind of rolling through this offseason. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of more recruiting stuff going on throughout the course of the next few weeks. So make sure you get the subtext, especially with this 2-week free trial. Great time to get it. 614-350-3315. From Andrew Gillis, I'm Stefan Krajisnik. Thank you for listening to Buckeye Talk.